All right. So, a different type of climate than we're in, right? It's kind of like a moist climate. We actually talked about climates clear back in Unit 1 when we said we've been talking a lot about weather more recently, but the difference between weather and climate is about a 30-year average, yeah. And so to me, it's kind of like a rolling average. So when they say that there's changes in the climate, then they keep adding on to, so there could be changes in the climate, but they have to get a new average. That's kind of how that goes. One of the things is it's hard to distinguish between two climates. I mean, if you're like me, it's hard to see where you step from one climate into another, okay? It's like, here I'm in this climate, here I'm in the other climate. You're like, really? Is that really how it works? We're going to see actually it's not that easy. There's kind of a transition zone between them. So the video we watched talked about this Koeppen method of classifying climates. And we're going to use a slightly modified. I think the Koeppen method really focuses more on plants, focuses on habitat. But we are going to focus on precipitation and temperature. So actually, if you want to put a star on this slide, the Unit 5 review sheet that I gave you actually lists this as being one of the questions on your final exam. How do we classify climates, precipitation and temperature? And then after the precipitation and temperature actually sets the stage for what sort of vegetation you're going to have and what sort of inhabitants you're going to have in that climate. So the video did a good job of stepping through the A, B, C, D, and E climates. Remember, E was at the poles, and A was actually, we're going to see, near the equator. So instead of the equator, though, in this class, we talked about something called the hot spot is the intertropical convergence zone. Yep. So it's really kind of handy. We're going to see another map of the world here in a minute. But basically, you can think of A, B, C. We are actually in D, okay, then E up here. But it's not quite that simple, okay? But when we classify climates, it's going to be a big letter, one of those big letters, and then sometimes a small letter next to it to kind of say what subgroup it is. So starting with the A, like I said, is kind of hugs up against the intertropical convergence zone. There are a couple different A-type climates. B, actually, do you remember? I like it because when it brings back something we talked about earlier in this class that, yeah, we have the Hadley and the Ferrell cell bumping up against each other, and where they bump up, about 30 degrees latitude, we have descending air, and so actually that's nice and warm and dry. So our C type of climates then would be above that, and we kind of saw that those are kind of in our southeast. On the show we watched, we have two mid-latitude climates, C and D. We actually, and this is another test question, I'm going to narrow it down further in the D climate, but this is us right here. We are a D-type climate. It's close between C and D, but this is us. This is you and me, okay? And we'll talk about kind of the subcategories of D, and then we go further to the north in our hemisphere, and we get to the polar climates. But remember that, and I don't think there are any well, anyway, remember that this is happening in both hemispheres. So a type of climate that I'm not really going to talk much about, and neither did the video, is this designated with H. It's the highland climates. Okay, so we're going to talk about kind of some subtypes of climates, and we're going to add some little letters to those big letters. And you can't see it very good, but for instance, there's an AF, an AM, an AW, and an AS. Okay, there's a B with a capital S and W, and also lowercase h and k, and they all mean something different. So what this is kind of showing you is that I said it's kind of hard to say where you're in one climate here and you're in a different climate over there, all right? This kind of fuzzy area, the brown area, is kind of showing you the transitions. No, I don't think, no, not quite. Maybe. Could be part of them. Part of them. This slide says, actually, when we talked about, pick a place to live and kind of what sort of weather would you have there, we talked about many of these same factors. Like this one, latitude. Remember, that's how close you are to the equator. That will affect your day-to-day weather. That will affect your overall climate. Are you on a coast? We call those maritime locations. Or are you inland, continental? That will affect it, yeah. What's your elevation? The topography means your proximity to mountains. Are you on the windward or the leeward side of a mountain? Okay, that affects climate just like it affects day-to-day weather. Okay, so these are then kind of like the map we saw in the video. So if I were able to zoom in up over here by where we are, you would see that we are DFA. So on your test, that's going to be it's going to be a multiple choice question. I don't have all of my Unit 5 questions figured out, but I have that one figured out. We are D, and followed by FA. I have a slide here coming up to kind of tell you what that means. That's our climate. So starting, kind of walking through each of the climates, the A climates are closest to the equator or intertropical convergence zone. You probably recognize these down here as climatograms, okay, for 3 different locations. Okay, of course the red bar up here is showing you temperature from January through December. Notice this one has the biggest temperature range. So that's the sort of thing we talked about clear back in Unit 2, I think. But the blue bars there are precipitation. So actually we have, for the A-type climates, I think I'm only going to take you through 3, not 4. But we have an AF, that's the first one. We have an AM, and there is an AW. Those are the 3 different climates there. So the AF is wet and near the intertropical convergence zone. The AM has monsoon seasons. Remember, that means just a dry season and a wet season, and that's because the intertropical convergence zone is migrating north or south as the Earth orbits the sun. And then the third type of climate is wet and dry. Those are the savannas. Those are with the giraffes and stuff, right? So just some pictures of A-type climates. Moving on to, I like this last slide because remember we talked about that wandering intertropical convergence zone, and there it is superimposed. The top one would be what in June, and the bottom would be what in December. So the B-type climates are there, kind of where the Hadley cell ends and the Ferrel cell begins. They are that descending air is generally dry. So there's forage variations of B-type climates. So not a whole lot to add here. B-type climates, and there's 4 climatograms over there on the right. They vary a little bit. B-type. And then on to the first of the 2 mid-latitude climates, the C-type mid-latitude climate. Some examples. Notice that the third climatogram, it's in the southern hemisphere. Doesn't this kind of catch your attention? The fact that it dips down. They have actually the minimum temperature in June. Okay, so that must be in the southern hemisphere. And by golly, it is 34 degrees south latitude. So here's a little bit about the different sea climates. Mediterranean sounds so exotic. Like a place to move to. Now that might be, like I said, I think, didn't he say, or yeah, was this where Washington State on the coast? Yeah. Okay, now we move to the D-type climates, and they are a little bit north of the C-type climates. They're also in the mid-latitudes in the Ferrel cell. Okay, but this actually would see if this describes us. Winters are very cold, us. The diurnal just means daily. So basically, do we have pretty large daily swings, temperature swings? I would say yes. Daily, that's my daily. And each year, I mean, we have hot summers and cold winters, and we get precipitation throughout the year. So, yep, that's us. Southeast Iowa's climate is classified as DFA, severe, mid-latitude, humid. You don't need to know well, I don't think. Just think DFA will get you. There's no dry season, and our summers are hot. That's us, smiley face. So taking a look at some of the, here's a climatogram of Chicago on the left and Moose Factory, Ontario on the right. Then we hit our polar climates. There's two types of polar climates. In general, there are no trees in the polar climates. There's the tundra climate, ET. Get it, ET. I'm going to see what it is there. One thing about the tundra climate, the ET climate, is, and I almost made this a vocabulary word and then bailed on it, but if you've ever heard of permafrost, we actually are going to talk about permafrost when we talk about climate change on Monday and Wednesday. So permafrost is permanently frozen, right? So in these cold climates, we count on, or they've got this phenomenon that's going on. So, yep, climate change would be this sort of thing. This bottom slide down here is showing you melting permafrost. All right. So the other type of polar climate is ice cap. And instead of ET, it's EF. I'm not sure why.
Just throws on.
Yep. So locations for this type would be Greenland and Antarctica. Notice that, again, kind of bringing back something that we talked about earlier in this class. Remember katabatic winds? Where did we say that is a good place for katabatic winds? Greenland. We said you need to have a cold plateau, and that works pretty well. Not much precipitation. I'm going to say cold air holds less moisture, because it does. That's one of the things we talked about earlier. And here are a couple of climatograms for the left one is the tundra and the other one is the ice sheet. Right? And that's all I have today.